Kindness without power is weakness disguised as virtue. No matter how honest you are, someone will betray you. No matter how loyal you've been, someone will discard you the moment you're no longer useful. And no matter how hard you try to be fair, the world will never return the favor. That's not pessimism. That's observation. That's reality stripped of fairy tales. Those who understand this reality, they survive. And those who survive, they rule. Not because they're cruel, but because they see clearly. They know that control isn't about shouting the loudest or hitting the hardest. It's about shaping perception, managing reactions, and mastering the invisible currents of human fear. This is what I call dark intelligence, not the kind that plots in shadows for destruction, but the kind that watches, listens, and moves only when the odds are stacked in your favor. It's the intelligence that knows silence terrifies more than threats. That restraint commands more respect than rage. That the real power lies not in what you do, but in what others believe you're capable of doing. It's the fox's cunning blended with the lion's strength, always calculating the psychological levers that pull people into line without a single word of command. But before we dive deep, let me be crystal clear, this isn't about becoming a monster. This is about becoming unbreakable. You're not learning to manipulate people. You're learning to protect yourself from those who already do. In a world where predators wear suits and wolves quote scripture, armor isn't optional. It's survival. Over the next 40 minutes, you'll uncover the hidden mechanics of fear, the psychological levers that govern obedience, loyalty, and influence. You'll learn how to wield them ethically, strategically, and with precision. This isn't about domination. It's about sovereignty, the kind that lets you walk into any room and never be prey again. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am not afraid of fear. Now let's unlock the secrets Machiavelli left buried in plain sight. Pause here for emphasis. You never build lasting influence on goodwill alone. People's loyalty shifts with their moods, their needs, their next opportunity. But fear is consistent. It doesn't waver when the wind changes. It doesn't vanish when you stop giving. Fear anchors behavior because it's tied to survival, not sentiment. It's the primal force that keeps people in check when affection fades, ensuring actions align with consequences rather than fleeting emotions. Machiavelli once said, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." Let's break that down. Most people chase love and approval, thinking it's the path to strong bonds. They pour energy into being liked, softening edges to avoid conflict. But here's the psychology. Human loyalty rooted in love is fragile because it's based on reciprocity. When benefits dry up, so does the bond. Fear, on the other hand, taps into the amygdala, the brain's fear center, triggering a survival response that overrides temporary feelings. Studies in social psychology show that fear-based compliance lasts longer in high-stakes environments because it creates a mental barrier against deviation. Think about historical empires. Roman leaders maintained order not just through legions, but through the dread of swift retribution. In modern politics, consider how fear of economic collapse or security threats sways voters during elections, as seen in the 2024 U.S. presidential race, where candidates amplified anxieties about inflation and border issues to rally support. Voters didn't always love the policies, but the fear of alternatives kept them loyal. Now scale that to your life. In a corporate boardroom, a CEO who rules through fear of layoffs during tough times, like Elon Musk at Twitter, where he demanded intense productivity or faced dismissal, ensures short-term output spikes, even if morale dips. The team doesn't adore him, but they deliver because the cost of failure looms large. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked. They soften their words, hide their boundaries, and apologize for existing, all in the name of being nice. But here's what happens the moment you stop pleasing: you become disposable. Think about your last workplace. The manager who smiled but never enforced standards. Ignored. The one who was fair but firm, even cold at times. Respected. Not because people loved them, but because they knew crossing that line had consequences. Instead, you could cultivate calibrated fear. Say nothing aggressive, but let your actions speak, deliver on promises, and enforce boundaries without apology. Notice the difference. One invites exploitation. The other demands deference. Now consider personal relationships. You've probably stayed silent when someone disrespected you, hoping kindness would win them over. Instead, they kept pushing. Why? Because your lack of consequence signaled safety, not strength. Fear isn't about terrorizing others. It's about establishing predictable boundaries that others dare not cross. It's the quiet certainty that if you're crossed, there will be a cost. Take dating. If a partner flakes repeatedly, most chase with more affection. But you could respond with detachment, pull back availability without explanation. Suddenly, they feel the uncertainty, the fear of loss, and behavior shifts. In family dynamics, refuse to fund endless bailouts for a sibling's poor choices. They learn quickly when fear of real consequences replaces endless goodwill. In sales, don't beg for the deal. Imply scarcity, like, "This offer expires soon," tapping into fear of missing out. A technique backed by behavioral economics research showing FOMO drives 80% of impulse buys. This doesn't mean you become cold or cruel. The key principle here is calibrated consequence. In professional settings, it's delivering feedback with zero emotional leakage, just facts and outcomes. In social circles, it's not returning calls from those who ghost you. In leadership roles, it's setting clear KPIs with real repercussions. As in tech firms where fear of performance reviews motivates innovation. What happens when you master this? People begin to treat you with caution, not out of hatred, but out of respect for your consistency. Your influence grows because fear creates reliability where love falters. Relationships deepen paradoxically as boundaries foster mutual respect. You stop being a doormat and become a force. Never confuse reliability with ruthlessness. Fear used wisely isn't a weapon, it's a fence. It keeps the wolves out and the garden intact. But wield it without balance, and it turns to hatred, eroding everything. Remember, affection fades, fear endures. Pause here for emphasis. You don't need to control every outcome, only how others interpret it. Reality is fixed, but perception is fluid. And in the theater of human interaction, perception is reality. If people believe you're in control, you are, even if you're barely holding on. This principle exploits cognitive biases like confirmation bias, where people see what they expect, allowing you to shape narratives that serve your position. Machiavelli once said, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." Let me explain. Most people react to events raw and unfiltered, letting emotions dictate their story. You get laid off, and you panic publicly, posting desperate updates on social media. Your partner withdraws, and you chase with pleading messages. A client ghosts you, and you spiral into self-doubt via frantic follow-ups. But the strategically intelligent, they manage the narrative. They know that how you frame a loss determines whether it's seen as weakness or strategy. Psychology research from sources like the American Psychological Association shows that fear and uncertainty amplify how we perceive threats, but controlled framing can redirect that energy. For instance, during the COVID-19 pandemic, leaders who framed lockdowns as strategic pauses for safety maintained public compliance, while those who admitted chaos fueled panic and resistance. In business, Elon Musk reframed massive Twitter layoffs as necessary streamlining for efficiency, turning potential backlash into a narrative of bold leadership, even as employees feared for their jobs. This perception control kept investors on board and competitors wary. Most people reveal their anxiety in real time, through tone, body language, rushed texts. Instead, you could pause, breathe, and respond with measured clarity. I'm evaluating my options. That single phrase shifts you from victim to strategist. It implies agency, not helplessness. Notice the difference. One exposes vulnerability. The other projects untouchable poise. This doesn't mean lying. The key principle here is narrative ownership. In negotiations, never say, "I can't afford that." Say, "That doesn't align with my current priorities." In dating, don't say, "I'm scared you'll leave." Say, "I only invest where mutual respect is clear." In public speaking, if you stumble, don't apologize. Smile and say, "Even the best scripts need improvisation." You reframe the flaw as charm. Expand this to politics. Candidates in recent elections framed economic fears as opportunities for reform, turning voter anxiety into support. In personal conflicts, when a friend spreads rumors, don't defend wildly, calmly state, "I focus on facts, not fiction," letting their perception of your calm erode their credibility. In marketing, brands like Apple frame high prices as premium exclusivity, controlling consumer perception to justify costs. What happens when you master this? People stop seeing your stumbles. They see your poise. They assume you're always 3 steps ahead, even when you're not. Teams rally around perceived strength. Relationships stabilize on balanced views, and opportunities multiply because your narrative attracts allies. Never sacrifice truth for image, but never let raw truth dictate your image either. Push too far into deception, and trust crumbles when reality bites. Remember, the eye believes before the hand feels. Pause here for emphasis. You never reveal your full hand. The more you speak, the more you give others to exploit. But silence creates mystery, and mystery breeds fear. When people can't read you, they assume you're dangerous. And that assumption is your shield. This taps into the human aversion to uncertainty, a psychological void that the brain fills with worst-case scenarios. Machiavelli once said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, because love is preserved by the link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage, but fear preserves you by a dread of punishment which never fails." Here's the psychology. Humans are pattern-seeking animals. When you're predictable, always available, always explaining, always reacting, they map your triggers and use them against you. But when you're quiet, they scramble to fill the void with their own fears. That's where your power lies. Neuroscientific studies reveal that silence activates the brain's threat detection more than overt threats, as ambiguity heightens cortisol levels. Look at historical figures like Queen Elizabeth I, who used prolonged silences in court to keep advisors guessing, maintaining control amid plots. In contemporary business, leaders like Jeff Bezos employed silent starts in meetings, reading memos quietly to build tension and focus attention. During negotiations, his unspoken pauses forced counterparts to overbid or concede. Think about the last time someone asked, "Why are you so quiet?" Did you rush to explain yourself? To prove you weren't angry? That's the trap. The moment you justify your silence, you surrender its power. Instead, hold the space. Let them squirm. Watch how quickly they project their guilt, their insecurity, their need for control onto your stillness. Most people over-explain to avoid discomfort. They say, "I didn't text back because my phone died and I was stressed," and instead, you could simply say, "I respond when I'm ready." Notice the difference. One begs for understanding. The other demands respect. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally unavailable. The key principle here is strategic withholding. In job interviews, don't reveal your desperation. Say, "I'm selective about where I invest my energy." In conflicts, don't defend your character. Say, "My actions speak for themselves." In negotiations, let the other side name the first number. Your silence pressures them to reveal their hand first. Apply this to relationships. If a partner gaslights you, denying facts to make you doubt reality, respond with silence instead of argument, starving the manipulation. In sales teams, a manager's quiet observation during pitches makes reps self-correct without criticism. In social media era conflicts, like public call-outs, silence denies oxygen to drama, as seen in celebrity feuds where non-response amplifies the accuser's isolation. What happens when you master this? People begin to second-guess themselves around you. They tread carefully. They assume you know more than you say, and that assumption alone gives you control. Alliances form cautiously, betrayals hesitate, and your presence commands without effort. Never confuse silence with passivity. Silence is the pause before the strike. Overuse it, though, and it breeds paranoia, fracturing bonds. Remember, the loudest weapon is the one never drawn. Pause here for emphasis. You never let your emotions dictate your actions. Rage, jealousy, neediness, these are chains. They make you predictable. They make you vulnerable. But detachment is armor. It lets you observe without reacting, act without attachment, and win without needing to. This freedom stems from emotional regulation, a core tenet in cognitive behavioral therapy, allowing clear decisions amid chaos. Machiavelli once said, "A prince ought to inspire fear in such a way that, if he does not win love, he avoids hatred, because he can endure very well being feared whilst he is not hated." Compassion without boundaries is self-sabotage. Think about the friend who constantly vents but never changes. You listen, you support, you drain yourself, until one day you snap. But the detached person, they say, "I care, but I can't carry this for you." They preserve their energy. They maintain their power. Psychological studies on burnout show that unchecked empathy leads to compassion fatigue, reducing effectiveness by 50% in helping professions. Now consider betrayal. Most people spiral, demanding explanations, replaying memories, begging for closure. But the strategically intelligent, they cut cleanly. No drama, no revenge, just distance. Why? Because emotional entanglement keeps the wound open. Detachment lets it scar. In leadership, consider how fear-based managers like those in high-pressure finance firms detach from personal feelings to make tough calls, such as firings, without hesitation, ensuring organizational survival. Most people confuse detachment with indifference. They think it means not caring. Instead, you could care deeply, but refuse to let that care dictate your behavior. You love your partner, but you won't tolerate lies. You value your job, but you won't beg for recognition. You honor your family, but you won't enable their dysfunction. This doesn't mean becoming cold. The key principle here is emotional sovereignty. In business, don't take rejection personally, see it as data. In love, don't cling, invite choice. In conflict, don't escalate, disengage until clarity returns. Expand to modern examples. During the 2023 tech layoffs, detached leaders framed decisions as business necessities, avoiding emotional pleas that could spark backlash. In relationships, counter love bombing. overwhelming affection to manipulate, by detaching and observing patterns before investing. In team dynamics, detach from ego to mediate disputes objectively, fostering psychological safety, as highlighted in recent workplace studies. What happens when you master this? You stop being a puppet of other people's moods. You become the director of your own response. Decisions sharpen, stress plummets, and power accumulates because others can't pull your strings. Never detach so much that you lose empathy, but never let empathy override your self-respect. Extreme detachment risks isolation, turning allies into strangers. Remember, the freest person in the room is the one who needs nothing from it. Pause here for emphasis. You never make your moves too obvious. Predictability is weakness, but uncertainty keeps others off balance. When they can't anticipate your next step, they hesitate. And hesitation is the gap where you seize control. This leverages the Zeigarnik effect, where unresolved tension heightens focus and anxiety. Machiavelli once said, "Men are driven by two things, love or fear. The greatest leaders are those who can make people both love and fear them. The lion uses force, the fox uses cunning, but the master blends both and reveals neither fully. You show just enough strength to deter, just enough mystery to intrigue. You keep people guessing whether you're generous or ruthless, forgiving or vengeful. That ambiguity is power. Evolutionary psychology explains that uncertainty mimics predator-prey dynamics, triggering vigilance. Think about a colleague who always says yes. They're taken for granted. Now think of the one who sometimes says yes, sometimes no, with no clear pattern. People treat them with caution. Why? Because they can't predict the outcome. That's the psychology of uncertainty. It triggers the brain's threat detection system. Uncertainty equals potential danger equals respect. Most people crave clarity so much they over-explain their boundaries, their plans, their feelings. Instead, you could say, "I'll decide when the time comes," or "My response depends on how this unfolds." Notice the difference. One gives control away, the other keeps it. This doesn't mean being manipulative. The key principle here is controlled ambiguity. In dating, don't reveal all your intentions on the first date. Let curiosity build. In leadership, don't announce every decision early. Let teams earn your trust through action. In negotiations, say, "I'm considering several options," even if you've already decided. It keeps the other side competing for your favor. Draw from real world. In politics, ambiguous foreign policy stances during elections create fear among opponents, as in recent global summits where leaders hinted at alliances without commitment. In business, startups use uncertainty in funding rounds to drive up valuations. In personal feuds, withhold forgiveness timelines to encourage genuine amends. What happens when you master this? People start working to earn your approval instead of assuming it. They invest more because the outcome isn't guaranteed. Innovation flourishes under balanced uncertainty as teams push boundaries. Never create uncertainty to torment, but to maintain strategic advantage. Too much breeds distrust, collapsing structures. Remember, the fog of war favors the prepared. Pause here for emphasis. You never underestimate the power of your name. What people believe about you precedes you into every room. A strong reputation deters enemies, attracts allies, and commands respect without a word spoken. But a weak one, it makes you fight for every inch. Reputation acts as social capital, amplified in networked societies. Machiavelli once said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." But friendly doesn't mean liked. It means respected, feared even. Your reputation isn't built on what you say, it's built on what you consistently do. Miss one deadline. You're human, Miss 3. You're unreliable. Forgive 1 betrayal. You're gracious. Forgive 10. You're a doormat. Social proof theory underscores how reputations influence behavior as people conform to perceived norms. Consider this. 2 freelancers charge the same rate. One delivers late, apologizes profusely, and begs for patience. The other delivers early, communicates clearly, and never negotiates scope creep. Over time, clients assume the second is elite, even if their work is identical. Why? Reputation. Most people try to repair their reputation after it's damaged. Instead, you could build it proactively, by under-promising and over-delivering, by never gossiping, by always honoring your word. Even in small things. Because small things compound into legend. This doesn't mean perfection. The key principle here is reputational consistency. In your career, always meet deadlines, even if it means saying no upfront. In friendships, never betray confidences, even if it costs you short-term drama. In public, never lose your temper, even when provoked. Incorporate modern insights in the digital age. Reputations are fragile. 1 viral misstep, like a CEO's ill-timed tweet, can tank stock prices, as with Musk's controversies. In relationships, consistent reliability counters gaslighting by establishing a baseline of trust. In activism, figures like climate leaders build reputations through unwavering advocacy, deterring critics. What happens when you master this? Opportunities come to you. People defend you when you're not in the room. Your name becomes your currency. Networks expand, threats recede, and influence persists. Never sacrifice long-term reputation for short-term comfort. Damage it irreparably, and rebuilding takes years. Remember, your shadow fights for you when you're not there. Pause here for emphasis. You never force compliance. You engineer it. People resist commands but embrace choices. So you give them options, both of which serve your goal. That's not deception. That's strategy. You let them feel in control while you steer the outcome. This draws from choice architecture in behavioral economics, nudging decisions subtly. Machiavelli once said, "He who wishes to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." Here's how it works. Instead of saying, "Do this," you say, "Would you prefer to handle this now or after lunch?" Either way, it gets done. Instead of demanding loyalty, you create conditions where disloyalty feels risky. You don't threaten. You make the cost of betrayal obvious through your actions. Psychological framing makes restricted choices feel empowering. Think about a parent who says, "You can either clean your room or lose screen time." The child feels they chose, but the parent controlled the frame. Now scale that to business. We can either renegotiate this contract now or revisit it next quarter when budgets are tighter. Same outcome, different psychology. Most people present ultimatums and wonder why they're resisted. Instead, you could say, "I see 2 paths forward. Both require your commitment. Which aligns better with your goals?" Notice the difference. One feels like control. The other feels like collaboration. This doesn't mean tricking people. The key principle here is framed autonomy. In sales, don't push a product. Ask, which feature matters more to you? In leadership, don't assign tasks. Say, which project excites you more? In relationships, don't demand time. Say, would you rather connect over dinner or a walk this weekend? You guide without gripping. Real world in negotiations like trade deals, offering binary options masks the controlled outcome. In therapy for manipulators, recognizing this counters coercion. In marketing, A/B testing frames choices to boost conversions. What happens when you master this? People follow you willingly because they believe it was their idea. Compliance rises, resistance falls, harmony prevails. Never engineer choice to exploit, but to align interests smoothly. Abuse it and resentment builds when illusions shatter. Remember, the best cages have open doors. Pause here for emphasis. You never confuse power with indulgence. True power isn't loud, it's quiet, consistent, and earned through daily discipline. It's saying no when it's hard. It's staying silent when you want to scream. It's choosing long-term strength over short-term relief. Discipline forges neural pathways for resilience, per habit formation research. Machiavelli once said, "His vengeance need not to be feared." But the deeper truth, the first method for estimating your power is to look at your habits. Do you sleep when you should work? Do you react when you should observe? Do you seek comfort when you should build resilience? Power isn't given. It's forged in the furnace of self-mastery. Consider the leader who parties every night versus the one who rises at 5 to plan. Both may hold titles, but only one commands real authority. Why? Because discipline signals seriousness, and seriousness commands fear. Most people wait for motivation to act. Instead, you could act first and let motivation follow. You don't wait to feel confident to speak. You speak until you become confident. You don't wait to feel ready to lead. You lead until you earn the title. This doesn't mean punishing yourself. The key principle here is ritualized restraint. Every morning, review your non-negotiables. Every evening, audit your reactions. In conflict, pause before replying. In success, stay humble. In failure, stay focused. Modern examples. Athletes like Serena Williams attribute success to disciplined routines amid pressure. In business, disciplined CEOs weather crises better, avoiding fear-driven panics. In personal growth, discipline counters dark tactics like guilt, tripping by maintaining boundaries. What happens when you master this? You become unshakable. People sense your steadiness, and they align with it. Empires endure through consistent effort. Never confuse discipline with rigidity. Discipline is the root. Flexibility is the branch. Neglect it, and power crumbles. Remember, empires aren't built in a day, but they are built every day. Pause here for emphasis. You've just learned the 8 traits of dark intelligence. The psychology of fear and control, wielded not as a weapon, but as a shield. But knowledge without application is worthless. It's just noise in your mind, soon forgotten. So here's your assignment: pick one trait. Just one. Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's emotional detachment. Maybe it's reputation. For the next 7 days, practice it relentlessly. Don't try to master all at once. Mastery comes through repetition, not revolution. Notice how people respond. Notice how you feel. Notice the shift in your energy. Track small wins, like how a silent pause in a meeting changes dynamics, or how detaching from a toxic conversation preserves your peace. And remember this: with great insight comes great responsibility. These tools are not for manipulation. They are for protection. Use them to shield your boundaries, not to shatter others. Use them to build your sovereignty, not to enslave. The world doesn't need more predators. It needs more unbreakable people who refuse to be prey. In an era where social media amplifies fear for clicks, as during the COVID-19 exploitation, ethical use means countering such tactics. Dark intelligence, applied wisely, fosters healthier dynamics, stronger teams, deeper relationships, resilient societies. Without ethics, it devolves into the very chaos it seeks to navigate, breeding cycles of distrust and harm. There are 2 types of people in this world. The first uses fear to control others. They lie, they gaslight, they exploit. They mistake cruelty for strength, employing dark psychology like love bombing in relationships to trap victims or coercion in business to extract unfair gains. The second uses fear to understand human nature, and uses that understanding to become unmanipulatable. They don't seek power over others. They seek power over themselves. That's the difference between a tyrant and a sovereign. Tyrants burn bridges for short gains. Sovereigns build empires on solid ground. In leadership, fear-mongers like those creating unproductive workplaces lose talent, costing billions in productivity, while sovereigns inspire through balanced fear and respect, as in psychologically safe environments. Which kind of person do you choose to be? The choice defines not just your path, but the ripple effects on those around you. Embrace sovereignty, and you elevate everyone. Chase tyranny, and isolation follows. If you felt this speech pierce through your illusions, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this truth matters. Subscribe and tap the bell, because next week, we dissect the art of strategic indifference. And in the comments, tell me which lesson hit you hardest. Was it the power of silence, the illusion of choice, or the brutal truth that fear outlasts love? Stay strategic, stay ethical, stay powerful. The world doesn't reward saints, it crowns survivors. Pause here for emphasis.